China Bella. Amaze Me Grace trying to work between horses, and the trailer is Melody Croon, and they run around the far turn. 50 seconds flat for the opening half mile. Paco Lopez just took a look over his shoulder aboard the third running Most Inspiring. Hasn't got to the top pair, Pancake and Recognition yet, with Lyra cutting the corner on the inside. 3/4, 1:14 and 1. They're at the top of the stretch. Jeffrey Sanchez trying to get one more furlong out of Recognition. Down the outside, Sapphire Kitten is rolling home, and Lyra's up the inside lane. Lyra has the lead. Sapphire Kitten's running out of time. Recognition still there for second. It's Lyra to win it. Recognition and a photo for second with Sapphire Kitten. Then came Most Inspiring and Amaze Me Grace down the outside in 1:38 and 4.
That was on Pete's resume tape.
Yeah, that was the call that helped get me the job.
Season stakes to a picture-perfect beginning. From the inside, Aiello Red is hustled out by Alex Berzer to try to get the early lead.
See, I don't like this call.
And the lead as they head into that first turn run.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say that. But
No,
I wasn't happy with this.
No, don't
then
say
down
that.
to the inside races Rock Heeb, situated about 3.5 lengths off the lead. Then it's a trio, including Smack Smack, and from between horses Incremental, Lashad rides the rail. It's a length to Love Bandit, then comes the Truth or Else, who's 2 in front of Natchez, and Springboard is last of the 11 as they head into the backstretch. They won an opening quarter in 23 and 4, and down the backstretch they go. On top, Aiello Red by a half a length, departing is second. 2 back to the outside, and Street Strategy third. Then Rahib, who's racing in fourth. He's a better than 4.5 off the lead. Improving between horses, races Incremental. Smack Smack is on his outside. Then down to the inside, losing ground a little bit, is Lashad in front of Love Bandit. Then comes the Truth or Else. Stretch of 5 lengths back. Second last is Natchez, and the trailer is Springboard. Inside half a mile away, they won an opening half mile in 48 and 1. Aiello Red continues to shoulder the load. Departing has every opportunity, racing in second.
For the
now.
record, the horse in front is racing today, guys.
His cue. He's third, trying to gain ground.
7-5
has an upset possibility, 25 to 1 and in range. 2 better than Smack Smack. Then down to the inside, it's Incremental, and they're at the top of the stretch. Aiello Red trying to do it all the way. Street Strategy on the outside, departing between horses. Then Raghib inside the final furlong. On the inside, Aiello Red refusing to yield, but McMahon and Street Strategy surging on the outside. Departing pins his ears between them. It's Departing. It's Street Strategy. It's Street Strategy. Street Strategy surge in the last jump to beat a unwavering Departing in 1:43 and 3.
I made it sound like I knew what I was talking about, but the very first thing I did after that was turn the TV on and make sure that I didn't mess up. That was close.
From the center, that's Gordy, Florida.
Now this call I like.
First call with the favorite Taves on Ice, moving with him in the early stages. On the outside, and Discreetness is now third. Show Good spun out wide on the course while racing in fourth. 2 better than Luna De Loco. They're followed by Gray Sky and Charming Deputy. Back together again, saves ground toward the inside. Wide on the course is Black Ops, and the 2 trailers are Force It and Synchrony.
So little commentary while this race is going. The only thing going through my mind at this point is first finish line, first finish line, first finish line. And I just hope I'm wrong, but at some point I'm going to mess that up before the end of the year.
Gray Sky on hold between horses, and Black Ops is out wide. 2 in front of Back Together Again, followed out wide by Force It, Synchrony between horses, and Charming Deputy is last of the 11. After a 23 and 2 opening quarter, they went a half mile. In 47 and 4, there's less than half a mile to go. Martin Garcia and Taves on Ice in front by a neck. Gordy, Florida is second. John Court moves Discreetness into the 3 path to race on third. From fourth now, Luna De Loco down toward the inside. Outside and Show Good, from between them, Gray Sky. Synchrony starting to improve with an inside journey in front of Black Ops. Then Charming Deputy, Force It, and Back Together Again. Less than a quarter of a mile to go now in the Smarty Jones Stakes, and Taves on Ice comes under pressure. It's Gordy, Florida, and Glenn Corbett who come away with the lead. To the outside, Discreetness is on the attack second. Luna De Loco guides through on the inside. Inside the final furlong of the Smarty Jones, Gordy, Florida, tough on the inside, and on the outside it's Discreetness. Discreetness and Gordy, Florida. Discreetness is in front. Gordy, Florida battles on. Discreetness wins. Discreetness for John Court and Jinx Fires win the Smarty Jones in 1:38 flat.
Pete said, who do I have to blame for this? Me. Well, Pete, officially welcome to Donna at Oaklawn. You're my first guest/victim.
Very happy to be here.
I'm glad your ride could come and get you.
Wow, this is going to turn into a half-an-hour roast. I think I would be prepared.
I think so. So first off, I just want to say a lot of racetrackers, I'm not excluded from this, are born into the business. You were not. You kind of come from the fan side of the industry. How did that come into play? Because you actually went a totally different route and went to school to get into the business. Tell everybody how that came to be.
Yeah, Nancy's exactly right. I was standing on the rail when I was a kid, this would have been a big deal for me to get to do this. And of course, my family would have never got up early enough to allow me to do it. But I didn't have any in the business. I didn't know anybody on the front side. I didn't know anybody on the back side. The only guy I knew was the guy who's screaming for the 5 because he bet his paycheck on him. I mean, that was really where my experience came from. But it didn't really deter me any, because I knew that this was an industry that I wanted to be part of, and I enjoyed going to the races, and I enjoyed everything about it. So when I was 14, I saw an advertisement in the Racing Forum for the racetrack industry program at the University of Arizona. So literally you can get a degree in horse racing. And the job placement rate through the U of A was, and it still is, it's very, very good. So I said, well, I think if I'm going to go to college and I'm going to do something that I enjoy, I might as well major in horse racing. Most of the people laughed at me or thought it was some sort of a joke. But when I applied for college, I only applied to one school. It was horse racing or bust. I don't know what I would have done if I didn't get in.
So how did that turn into, okay, I want to work in horse racing. I want to be an announcer.
Well, that's also a little bit of an interesting story. I mean, I think that anytime, you're passionate about something, you want to try to find an outlet that conveys your passion for what what you're looking at, whether you're in football, baseball, or any sport or any hobby, really. Anything that you have an outlet for, I think that you want to try to express yourself. But my story is not quite as glamorous. My father bought me a horse racing computer game, and there was no announcer in it. It was a great game. It was extremely well done. In my opinion, one of the better games ever made, but there was no announcer. And that bothered me significantly. So I would play this game for hours and hours and hours, to the point where the game itself wasn't entertaining anymore. So I said, well, I guess I'll just watch these races and mumble to myself to entertain myself. So, there would be a screen where the names of the horses would be, and I'd just write them down, and it started mumbling, not audible to anybody but me. But I think I got to doing it so often, I got more and more into it, and I get more and more confident. I got louder and louder and louder, until one day my dad's I was on the second floor of the condo that we lived in. My dad comes in from the outside. He says, "Hey, shut up. I can hear you from outside."
You're cheering your own horse home. So you actually had the honor of being mentored by one of the greatest in the industry, Luke Krybos, who is no longer with us. What were some of the words? How did that mentorship even come to be? And what were some of the words of wisdom that he bestowed upon you?
Well, I don't know if we have that kind of time. I mean, I could talk about for hours just about how much he's done for my career. And for those of you who don't know, he was the longtime announcer at Hollywood and Turf Paradise, and then at Churchill Downs. So he called the Kentucky Derby on a regular basis. But the introduction was actually fairly easy, because the gentleman who was on the advertisement that I saw on the Racing Forum was Luke Krybos, which is one of the reasons why I thought, that it was possible for me to be a track announcer, because he had gone to that program and he was having a lot of success in the business. So when I was, when you go to the program, the very first thing they ask you is, what kind of part of the business do you want to be in? And they have two facets. You can go on the backside. My best friend in the world and my roommate in college is actually a trainer in Maryland now. And Bob Baffert graduated from the program, and Todd Pletcher graduated from the program. So they have a pretty, stiff alumni list. But I went on the front side. So I said I wanted to be an announcer. And of course, the general consensus was, oh no, not another one of these guys. So when every December, even now, they have a symposium on horse racing that's kind of an international gathering of the who's in the racing business. Was part of going to the program, they allow you to pick a mentor, and they try to set it up, somebody in the racing industry that you can talk to about what you want to do in the business and swap stories with and try to get help from. And that was how I met Luke. And I remember he brought me a saddle towel. I still have this, a saddle towel from the Firecracker Handicap at Churchill. And I was, awestruck. So I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. And I was in December. And he said, well, we'll have to give you an audition. And he told me he was always very direct with me, and I very much appreciated it. He never sugarcoated anything. And he said, listen, I was a freshman in college, and he said, you're young enough now where if you aren't any good, I have a duty to tell you that you're not any good, because you still have time within the confines of the racing program that you can hone your skills to do something else, whether it's working in the racing office or in the marketing office or what have you. So I don't want you to have to waste your time on something that I don't think you're going to be up to snuff on. So about 6 weeks later, I was working a little tiny race meet in Tucson, Arizona, which opens today, by the way. And he actually called me and he said, I think I'm going to get you a shot to call a race. And I said, okay. And he said, well, I'll let you know. Well, this is always so divine to me. In Arizona, unlike any place in the world, when it rains, nothing good happens. So it rained in Phoenix. And usually, and if you're familiar with racing at all, usually when it rains, and here at Oaklawn, we don't have a turf course, but if we did, if it rains, they would take the races off the turf and move them onto the dirt. At Turf Paradise, they did it the other way. They took the races off the dirt because the dirt was so washed out because it's so filled with clay, and they move them onto the grass. Well, they had done that the day before, and it didn't work. So the short story is Luke was off the day that I was supposed to start calling races in Tucson. So he drove from Phoenix to Tucson to hear me call a race. And if I had known that he was in the building, I would have completely choked. But I didn't know. So I called the race. I would let all of you listen to it, especially seeing that it was my first time. I wouldn't send it to anybody for, a job audition or anything, but all things considered, I thought it went pretty well. So came down the stairs, and there he was standing at the bottom of the staircase. And I said, well, what'd you think? And he looks around and, well, I'm like, tell me, come on. You don't suck. So it was about, I think it was all of 24 hours later, he knew the person who ran the Arizona County Fair circuit, which unfortunately for younger students and, aspiring anybody in the business, it's no longer around. But it was great for me. And I had to go and to these little 2 stoplight towns all over the state of Arizona 2 weekends at a time. It was like a traveling circus. And for full disclosure, I had no car there either. And it was hours. I can honestly remember I think it was the third day I ever called races. I had to go 2.5 hours one way. And I got somebody to take me down there, but they refused to stay. So I had no idea how I was going to get home.
Would you thumb it?
Yeah, pretty much. I found somebody that I kind of knew. And I stayed at their house overnight and then went back the next morning.
Oh, good Lord. Anyway, let's fast forward, because this is one of my favorite Aiello stories, the little time that we've known each other. Later down the line, you were given a chance to call the last race on the card at Tampa. I can already see the look of anguish on his face. The announcer had to take off the last race of the day.
No, he didn't.
Oh, you were just given the shot to call.
Yeah.
Pete didn't tell a soul that he was going to call the last race.
Yeah, because, a little backstory on what Nancy's talking about. Luke was always, I had to follow the Luke program. So I had to call races on the fairs and pay my dues. I was going to get my shot when he was ready to get my shot. But at that point I was, networking out and branching around, and I had met Margot Flynn at Tampa Bay Downs. She's the director of operations there. And then I had got to meet Richard Grunder, who is the announcer there and is the announcer to this day. And Richard is one of the most passionate individuals you'll ever meet. He actually does something very similar to this at Tampa. And I just was completely enchanted by him, and I loved it, the enthusiasm that he brought to the game. And I kind of, I kissed a little tail for a couple of years and tried to get an opportunity to call a race. And so, as Nancy said, they told me on Friday that I would be calling the last race on Sunday because they wanted to give me an opportunity to memorize the horses and have everything be prepared. So we were staying in a local hotel, and my father would fall asleep. So I would go in the bathroom, sit in the bathtub, and just memorize these horses over and over and over and over. Which, ironically enough, is like the complete polar opposite of what I do now. But anyway, I didn't tell a soul because this was a big deal. This was the first time that my voice was going to be heard on a national stage. And so I'm sitting in the grandstand. I was calling the 11th race. It was the 9th race was running. I remember what chair it was in the grandstand. And my phone rings. Now, mind you, I haven't spoke to Luke in about 6 months. And here's Luke's on the caller ID. This is interesting. What timing? So I answered the phone, and I said, hey, Luke. I said, how are you? He says, I'm fine. I hear you're calling the last race at Tampa today. And to this day, guys, I he's no longer with us, but that's the one thing I want to know. I want to know who told him, because there was literally, as Nancy said, you could count on one hand who told, or who knew. And he said he was not too thrilled about the idea. And he said, listen, no pressure or anything, but this is your career right here. You mess this up, you're throwing everything away. And so here I am, already nervous. And so I go up to the announcer booth, and God bless Richard. This was actually little did I know at the time, but this was one of the best things he could have ever done. I got up there, and he said, all right, Pete. He says, the show is yours. And he walked out. He was downstairs having a nightcap when the race was running.
No words of wisdom. No, just, I'll see you tomorrow.
No, you'll be fine, kid. Thanks, Leo. Have a good time. So at the time, I mean, I was a young, aspiring announcer. I didn't have regular binoculars. Binoculars I had were the binoculars I took to the races for years, and I dropped them down the stairs about 6 or 7 times so you could only see out of one eye. So now I'm like, well, man, I really am at the deep end of the pool here, because at the time I had never used binoculars to call a race. I knew that's what you had to do, but I hadn't done it. And one of the stewards comes in about 5 minutes before the race, and I'm, the horse racing parlance, I'm washing out bad. And he comes in, he says, you're not going to use those things, are you? I said, well, sir, I don't really have any choice. And God bless him, he brought me like a $1,300 pair of binoculars, nicer than I use now. And he says, here, use mine. And the logic was that because the race was for 2-year-olds and it was going 2 turns, that at that point in the year, a lot of the 2-year-olds would get tired, so they would string out. And, obviously the worst thing that you can have as an announcer is you can have horses stacked up. So they're 4 and 5 deep because you can't see. They cover each other up. So the logic was, we'll give you an easy race, going long, which is much easier because you have more time to settle in. 2-year-olds, so they'll string out. Well, of course, Murphy's Law kicks in, and there are 9 horses across the track going into the first turn. Horse breaks a rein down the backside, so one of them pulls up, and then 2 horses hook up at the far turn and affirmed an Alidar in the Belmont style, neck and neck, nose and nose. So I got through it, and Luke called me back, and he said, well, he says, we can work with this.
But what happened when you walked out of the booth?
Vomit. Significant projectile vomiting. As soon as the race crossed the wire, then the winner of the race was Sheet Cat. I said, Sheet Cat prevails by a neck. And I shut the mic off, and I ran down the hallway. And I think I've only done it 1 time since. But
And what was that situation?
that was my first cradle stakes at River Downs. That was my first big job, was in Cincinnati at River Downs. And that was my first, big race. And I used to have this nervous tick, and I'm hoping it doesn't make a return for the Rebel or for the Arkansas Derby.
I was going to say, we'll have a bucket outside the booth
for
the Rebel.
It's not throwing up. I can actually impersonate it because I stand up when I call the races. And I used to have this nervous tick for a long time where my leg would shake like this. And I couldn't stop it. So, I'm trying to focus on what I'm doing. And the last thing I need is my leg moving and the binoculars going like this back and forth. So I hope I'm over that, but that used to happen all too frequently, and it happened the whole race in this cradle stakes. I was shaking, and I didn't mess up, and I was pretty happy with it. I went downstairs.
Arkansas Derby's a pretty big deal, my friend.
Well, I mean, one of the best piece of advices I ever got was from Vic Stauffer out in California, who I know you know, and gave me the best piece of advice before I started, and it's going to come across probably to all of you like it did to me, which was nobody's listening. And I said, Vic, what do you mean nobody's listening? You're crushing my dreams here. What do you mean nobody's listening? And pretty much what he told me was, and there is some truth to this, and I challenge any of you to think of it in your own terms when you come to the races. you're listening for the ambiance, and there's so many fans screaming and everything's going on. You're hearing, you want to hear me, but you're not listening to every syllable and every word that I said, either because you can't, or you don't want to. Conversely, the other side of the coin is Nancy's husband, Paul. He's listening for Midas Dancer. He's listening for his name of his horse, the same as the owners would be. They want to hear their horse's name. So the point was, how do I let both of those parties know that I just messed up? The answer is I say nothing, or I stumble over my words, or I mumble, or ooh. And what his point was is, even if you know what you're saying is 1,000% wrong, it's better than going or having the awkward pause, because if you have that awkward pause, everybody knows you just messed up. Whereas, what I used to do for a long time, and this is the advice that Vic gave me, if there was, 3 or 4 lengths and there was a horse and I had no idea who it was, I'd make one up. And 9 out of 10 times, it was some other horse that had ran, earlier that week. So the only person who would know was the trainer of the wrong horse. And then I used to do this thing in Ohio where we would have visitors to the announcer booth, and they would give me a horse, and I would magically insert the horse in the run down the backstretch, and they would disappear by the time they turned for home. Just to kind of prove the point that you're only listening for what you want to hear.
Now, you had mentioned kind of, memorizing horses 24 hours in advance. You no longer do that. Every announcer kind of has their own routine that they go through pre-race. Now, when we had first spoken prior to you even getting here, you had mentioned, I said, do you crayon, do you marker, how do you do it? And you had something very interesting that you had said. You said, I don't do anything anymore. So how did that walk us through your routine?
Well, when I started, Lucas obviously trying to give me helpful hints to memorize. And at the time when I started, it was a completely different set of circumstances because, can I borrow your paper? It's a good prop. And when I was calling I was calling on little tracks. So they were half-mile tracks. So they were half as wide as this. So the backstretch was half as far. So you didn't need binoculars. So I quite literally, a microphone just like this, with my program in this hand, and when I started, if I could knew it was the 5, so I would just, and what would happen is when I would go back and critique myself, and I'm always still my own worst critic, most people couldn't hear the inaudible pauses of me looking, but I could, and I knew that I could streamline it and do better. But it's hard in any type of job, I think, if you're just doing something sporadically. You really can't get too good at it until you get to settle in and do it your way and do it over and over and over and over again. So when I got the job in Cincinnati in 2008, I kind of used that as my laboratory, and I would, I kind of did what I used to do and write the names out phonetically and spend hours and hours on end preparing, and I'd go back and listen to the race, and then I'd try to just cold call it, and I'd go back and listen to the race. And I said, man, the cold calls sound better. I can tell the difference, and I don't like that. So what I ended up realizing is that I'm lucky enough where I think I have a little bit of my grandfather's photographic memory. And so I just cold call it. So my calls are either really, really sharp and really good, or I'm completely lost. And I'll be the first to tell you. Either I'm really struggling because I have no idea who's who, or I got it down pat. And honestly, when you watch that video montage, when I said that I didn't like the first call, I was looking down and referencing and trying to figure out who's where and what. But the second call, I can remember there was never any trouble. And one of the things that's weird, even now calling races, and especially here at Oaklawn, I'll have days where mentally I don't feel like I did very well. And then I'll go back and listen to the replays, and I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm talking about. They sounded just fine.
Now, most track announcers are actually pretty good handicappers, some better than others. You, at one point, actually published your own tip sheets.
Yeah, I did that 2 different places, actually. I did a lot of what Nancy did when I was in Tucson. I wasn't obviously calling the races, but I took full advantage of whatever opportunities they would give me. And I don't know where he went to, but our photographer, Curtis Cody, there he is. His older brother, Sean, was running the video department there. And so he was kind of calling the shots. And I didn't know Curtis at the time, but I got to know his brother really well. And then they didn't have any sort of paddock analyst, but they had a microphone, so why not have one? So of course, I wasn't getting paid, so I would do that in the paddock. And then when I moved to Iowa, I would publish a tip sheet, and that would be kind of a supplement of my income.
Now, you still dabble on the handicapping side. What are some of your favorite handicapping angles?
Well, I think when you're looking at a race on paper, you have to try to put it in context of the grand scheme of the horse itself. And I have no knowledge, and I'll be the first to say, I have no knowledge of anything on the backside. I mean, I know, the general idea of what's supposed to happen, but I don't pretend to know anything like Nancy knows about the way a horse looks.
Oh, that's a stretch, buddy.
The way the horse has been training. I mean, the horses will gallop by, and I'll probably be standing right next to you guys going, oh, yeah, that horse is pretty. Boy, he does look good. And then we'll both find out he's like some maiden that's never won. I mean, I don't know. But horses have cycles. I mean, I think it's just like anything in life. You have the ups and the downs. And what I always try to figure out on paper is where the horse is in the cycle. And then if I can figure that out with any amount of confidence, I can kind of figure out, okay, do I want a horse that's up or do I want a horse that's down? But even on his down game, he's better than everyone else going up. I'm trying to figure out kind of, where everybody is.
He's coming into his own, so to speak.
Yeah.
I got you. So obviously this is your first year here. What has your Oaklawn experience been like? Because I know that your dad is a huge Oaklawn fan.
Yeah, I'll tell that story really quick. My dad actually, he's never been to Arkansas. Like, I don't know where the Oaklawn affinity came from, but he loved watching races at Oaklawn. It was always the highlight of his year, and we would go to the local dog track in Florida, and that would be what he would be focused on. And he fell in love with a horse named Chindy, who Steve Hobby trained.
Who was out here earlier.
Oh, he was?
He's Steve Hobby's pony. He's 22 years old.
Yeah, so that horse is my father's favorite horse of all time. His password for his bank account is Chindy. His Facebook
now
login,
he's gonna have to change it. That's okay.
His username is Chindy. I mean, everything is related to Chindy or Oaklawn and son of somebody's birthday. So when he comes here, he's never been. He's obviously going to come because I'm here. But I've already talked to Steve. He doesn't know Chindy is around, and I'm going to take him to the backside and show him his favorite horse. So that'll be pretty cool.
You're going to make a grown man cry.
I hope so.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. So what are some of the things that you're looking forward to later in the meet? I personally hope you spew after the Arkansas Derby, but that's just me personally. Lots of big horses have come here. What have been some of your favorite moments so far?
Well, I told our director of racing yesterday, actually, after the last race, that one of the things that, again, Nancy talked about different styles. Some of the announcers, and Tom Durkin, who was pretty well regarded as one of the best of all time, he was well known for scripting calls. He would have a big book. It was about 200 pages long of adjectives and phrases that he could use, and he would have a call in mind. And I always was of the opinion that it should come naturally. But that said, it does help if you have some line that you're planning to deliver for a really, really good horse. Or, as I always try to think of it, there are situations like any of the big races or the Arkansas Derby, the Rebel, the Oaklawn Handicap, the Apple Blossom. We're going to be watching those replays for 30 and 40 years. And I want to make sure that I create a race that creates the memory, and you can relive the memory, and you can go back and go, yep, I was there. I was standing on the third floor in box 12. So, every once in a while, it's not bad to try to think about what you're going to say. I've tried 3 times since I've been here, and I'm 0 for 3. So it just goes to show you that when you try to plan something, it never works out. I had one planned yesterday for Steve Asmussen's horse. I had one planned for Taves on Ice in the race that we watched. Mm-hmm. Nothing worked.
Well, maybe it'll happen. Do you have anything planned for the Southwest?
No, I haven't even looked at the Southwest. I have to worry about the Essex and the Byakoa first.
Okay. So anything that you like today?
Well, actually, the race that we watched, the horse that was in the ended up finishing 4th in the 5th season, Ecleto Red, he's in today against much less stock than he was in against. But that comes with the caveat, because he's a horse that does his best running on the lead. And there are some other horses in there that do that. So he might not have the best scenario, but as horse racing tends to be, the cream rises to the top, and he certainly appears to be the cream in there.
Definitely. Yep. So what are some of the things that you've gotten to experience here in Hot Springs off the racetrack? Because I know that, in that one picture that I put in there that I love so much, he's at the top of Hickory Nut, which overlooks Lake Ouachita, wearing a Razorback hat, drinking a bottle of Mountain Valley water.
That was
which
all
I love. I absolutely love that shot.
Which I love the shot too, but I didn't consider the Arkansas-esqueness of the shot.
Being a native Arkansan, I did.
Well, I mean,
and
I
not Arkansan, by the way.
Thank you for that.
Just wanted
She's
to point
poking
that out.
fun at me. There was a horse named the Arkansan. I'm not from Arkansas, so I didn't realize that. So it was not the Arkansan until the other day when he ran. I did fix it. But
see, when you're the new guy, you gotta get a little bit of a hazing in.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would do the same thing if I was on the other side of the table. So, no, I mean, I think the thing that has been so great, and I'd like to say that it was a surprise, but it wasn't a surprise. I mean, I knew before I applied to be the announcer at Oaklawn that you folks are some of the best racing fans in all of North America, and that the entire town of Hot Springs rallies around Oaklawn Park, and everybody from Little Rock all the way west enjoys the racing and appreciates everything that Oaklawn brings to the Arkansas economy and to the Arkansas community. So I love being able to go to dinner and meeting all of you, and I was at Dawn at Oaklawn, or that horse you were talking about in the 6, thank you for costing me $5 on that, or whatever. I love that because I come from the big city guy where I go in and nobody knows who I am, nobody cares who I am, and then when my friend tries to build me up as this celebrity, he's the announcer. What is that? So it's great to be kind of surrounded and immersed in everyone who enjoys what I enjoy. And then, somebody as passionate as I am for horse racing, to get to be around people who appreciate and are passionate about it as well. I mean, there's not really a price you can put on that.
Are there any questions from our audience? I want to open it up to kind of Q&A. Question? Repeat the question, Pete.
How do I keep track of them in the slop? That's a great question. Hopefully, the silks don't get covered with mud, but one of the things that you do is a lot of people, do you memorize the silks? Well, yes, I do. But at the same time, I want to find out anything I can that's unique to that horse, whether it's the jockey or the blinkers or the wraps that he's wearing or the shadow roll color, the fact that he has a big white blaze on his face, he's a gray. Anything that's unique is what I try to memorize him to. I mean, to the point we watched that race where Discreetness won, I didn't have to look down to know that Gordy Florida was ridden by Glenn Corbett, because as soon as he did this with the whip, I knew it was him.
Now, does Gulfstream have Trackus?
Yes.
Okay, so Trackus is a system where there is a chip in the saddle towel, and it also designates on the television screen where that horse is lying in the field. Do you find that some track announcers become reliant upon Trackus?
No comment. No, I wouldn't say that you become reliant on it. I would say very much so from my experience. It doesn't help you.
Because sometimes I've seen Trackus, sorry to interrupt, because I work at a track later in the year that has Trackus, and sometimes the Trackus gets a little psychotic and can do
that was what I was
things.
just going to say. As soon as you want to use it as a crutch, it's not there for you.
Right.
And that also goes with the TV. I mean, it actually did happen here once, but as soon as I try to never look at the TV. That's somewhat sacrilegious. So as soon as I try, because I need to get a time, or sometimes you can see the quality of the colors better on the TV than through the binoculars. So if there's a horse buried, I'm looking at the TV maybe for a second to see if I can figure out who it is. Every time you try that, is the shot goes bad, or there was a race in Florida, it was raining so hard you couldn't see. And I had figured out who was who when the race started, and then I just kept trying to memorize, to your point about the slop, I just tried to keep everybody in line, and then if somebody moved, I tried to figure out who it was. And then I did the very worst thing. I was rolling right along, and it would have been something where you could have watched it and go, how does he know? And I looked at the TV to try to double-check myself, and the TV guy was so confused as to where they were, he switched the camera angle right when I looked. And I just kept going, but it completely ruined the momentum, because then I wasn't sure who was where, because then you have to, one of the things is anytime you have to do something where you're looking at the teletimer, which is great for me. I haven't got to use a teletimer in a long time. Or looking at the TV, or anytime you have to reference something, I look down. You got to kind of keep your binoculars moving. And it's happened to me a couple times here where I go to look down for a couple of names and I put my binoculars back up and there's no horses in the frame. Like, where did they go? And then I have to pull them back down and then pick them back up. So.
And can I say that I love the fact that you call out the fractions. I miss when track announcers don't do that.
Well, I can
really,
tell you,
really do like that.
I can tell you that story. Dave Johnson, who you probably don't know the name Dave Johnson, but as soon as I say this, you're going to know exactly who I mean. And down the stretch they come. He's the one that made that famous, and he was an icon for me. And I got to meet him through the University of Arizona into my sophomore and senior year. And one of the coolest experiences ever was giving him a DVD. By that time, I'd had a DVD that I was peddling around, and I'd give it to anybody who could possibly employ or help me. And I gave it to Dave, and I said, hey, would you mind listening to this? And he actually, not only did he listen, he called me to give me critiques. And he told me, he says, first of all, if you ever need a reference, feel free to list me. And just to give you some perspective from that's like Mick Jagger telling you that if somebody needs a lead singer reference, just tell them Mick Jagger says I'm okay. But one of the things he told me, Nancy, was he's like, the only thing you don't do that would make you completely a complete package is call the fractions. So like I said, when I was the first year in Cincinnati, it was a laboratory, I'm trying to do it, I learned how to call the fractions. Now, at the time, River Downs had a teletimer just like that. So that was how I learned. But for the last 4 years, they don't have one. So I have to get them off the TV. So I'm slowly but surely, sometimes I'm sure you'll notice, and I know you notice, I'll get the quarter but not the half. I'll get the half but not the quarter. And that's not intentional. That's because I'm trying to figure out and get a routine for myself here at Oaklawn. Where do I look to get it? And one of the things I learned the hard way, actually, is that if you look at the TV monitors here at Oaklawn, and for example, sometimes a lot of things are going on. There's 12 horses. Right when they get to the quarter, I can't stop because who I'm calling who's eighth to tell you what they went the quarter in. So sometimes, you get ahead of yourself. So you may wait right before the half. You can get the half. I did it in that race. You get the quarter and then you get the half. Well, I was using the TV. Well, the way the graphics package is set up here at Oaklawn, once the quarter is over and they get to the half, you can't get the quarter. You can here because they stack the times. But that messed me up a couple times.
I mean, that's a huge benefit to the horsemen as well.
Yeah.
I mean, because they don't want to look away from either the monitor or the teletimer, or look away from the race itself. Right. They just want to watch the actual race.
Right. And one of the things, too, I mean, we all have our different pet peeves and our different styles and things. One of the things that I hate is an announcer who doesn't call the fractional times, but then makes a comment about how fast or how slow the race is that's not commensurate with the times. In other words, the pace is slow, and we know? And 20. Well, then they went 20. You're looking on the TV, and they went 22-1 for the opening quarter. What are you talking about? The pace isn't slow; they're flying. So,
any other questions for Pete? What's your longest losing streak?
We might be on it right now, to be honest with you. I haven't been able to hit sand if I fell off a camel lately. So,
this meet has been actually amazing with the amount of long shots that have just really upset some solid favorites. Don't you think? I mean, there's some trainers that, haven't really, that are normally really, really striking at a hot rate so far, normally at this point in the meet, that just haven't really fired a whole lot. But I mean, there's been some major upsets.
Probably too much information on my part, but I'm a multi-leg guy, so I like to play pick threes and the pick fours and things. And my problem has been I can't link them together. I may have 4 winners on the day, but they're not all in succession.
They don't take those tickets at the window, do they?
Yeah. No.
Any other questions for track announcer Pete Aiello? He'll answer anything. Okay, Pete, what do you do in your spare time?
Great question. I love fishing, as I'm sure you saw in the picture. So I'm looking forward to getting to Lake Ouachita and the surrounding areas and doing some fishing here in Arkansas. I've been fishing on my days off. I live right on Lake Hamilton, so I've done that every day since I've been here. I've only caught 1 fish. I'm happy to report I've only had 1 bite, though, so at least I'm batting 1,000.
He's consistent.
Who put you up to that question? There's a lot of. Oh, he probably. Now I got it. He put him up to that. Curtis and I went fishing for snook about a month and a half ago, and Curtis caught 4 of them. The guy I was with caught 4 of them. I got 0. And I had never caught one prior to that, so it was even worse. So no, I have not caught a snook, but thank you for asking.
Pete is also an avid badminton player.
Well, there's a story to that. I had chronic foot issues, so my high school football career was cut short. But I can tell you that, to your prior point about how's my experience been here in Hot Springs, I've been working 7 days a week, pretty much day and night until I got here. And I think that in a situation in life, and not to go off on some soapbox rant, but when you're stressed out, you don't know how stressed out you are until you're not stressed out. And I can tell you that my quality of life, I feel better now than I have in years.
It's the water.
So, it might be. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, I want it to keep staying the way it is. I already answered that question, but I'll answer it again.
We're fantastic.
We
don't get any better.
As I said before, I mean, I'm from the South. I was born and raised in Florida, but Southern hospitality stops about 2 hours north of where I call home. So I don't get to experience the hospitality end of it where I am, but I have here, and it's a wonderful feeling.
How are your coworkers, Pete?
Well, there's some that are a little wily. Some you have to watch. If you see this woman, she's walking around today. She's got a purple jacket on, and her teeth are chattering. Just be very careful what you say, because she can kind of explode at any point. I rest my case.
She has a mean rear naked choke, too.
No, I mean, I love everybody. Everybody's been so friendly and so nice. And, there's always that adjustment period for being the new guy. And whether it's, I know that from being all across the country. And that's why every time somebody comes up to me and says, oh, you're doing a great job. I'm also from Miami, so I tend to not believe those things. But at the same time, I'm waiting for the guy who comes up and goes, I like Frank way better than you. You suck. Or bring Terry back. We want Terry. I'm waiting for the signs, waiting for somebody to hold up a sign. I look down. We want Terry, from up there. But it's really not been that way. Everyone's been so nice, and I appreciate it so much.
Now, Pete is very, overly self-critical, but I do have to say you are an amazing addition to Oaklawn, and you are doing a phenomenal job. And don't let that go to your head, though.
I can't. I wish I could, but thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for track announcer Pete Aiello.